Eric McKinney here with former USC fullback Lynn Cain. Lynn, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yes, oh, you're welcome. Glad to be a part of it.
So let's just jump in. First and 10 with Lynn Cain. You were one of a bunch of junior college prospects to eventually make their way to USC. When you're going through that recruiting process, when did you know I'm going to USC? That's the school for me.
There was a couple of factors that went into the decision that I made to go there. I shouldn't say a couple, more than a couple. Obviously, the history of USC was just tremendous. Watching USC, being born in that time and phase of hearing about USC was big for me. And the best move my mother and father made is when we moved from Picayune, Mississippi to Los Angeles. And when I went to Los Angeles, now you had the Rose Bowl game played every year and that whole thing. And then you had the great players that were playing. And then Mike Garrett lived in the same neighborhood in Boyle Heights where I grew up. And I was hearing about Mike Garrett and him going from Roosevelt, which I wound up going to Roosevelt, and he goes on to USC. From USC goes to Kansas City, and I'm watching all this. And then to watch USC play all those great games, even you go back to when Mike played there at SC, that was tremendous watching them, and coming. And Thanksgiving was always a big game that was coming around, UCLA, USC type of thing. So that was in me to want to be a part of SC when it came to football. The flight, when I was being recruited, I became the top junior college player recruited in the country, and was going different places and setting up places where I can go. California, Cal wanted me to fly there, and Arizona State was knocking at the door. But I went to Washington. And unfortunately for Washington, it was raining, the rainy season, and that airplane was hitting the air pockets and it was dropping. And we hit that pocket and then that plane would climb back up. We drop again. That moment I said, I'm staying home. I will stay home. I called up Arizona State. No, I'm not going. Cal Berkeley, Stanford. No, I'm not interested. I'm sorry. Oh, but you promised that. Hey, I'm sorry. I was like John Madden. If they put me in a bus, I'd have been all right. But
another reason for USC fans to be thankful for the weather here in Southern California.
And then, those two factors right there it was in me. And I remember Marv Gould, when I was sitting across from him, he says in that rough voice, Lenny, what is your childhood dream? What is that? And I said, to play at the University of Southern California. He said, that's your team, son. Woo. So I signed.
So then when you're at USC, looking back, what's your favorite game? The favorite game that you played in during your career as a Trojan?
Deep in my mind, even though it's UCLA, playing against people that I grew up with, and that whole big thing about USC, a UCLA game and USC, and especially in the Coliseum, and Alabama, going down there playing Alabama. We played Alabama in 77, then turned around and played them in 78. That whole thing. But I tell you what, that Notre Dame game, 1977, in South Bend, when they broke out with those green jerseys, wow. That trip, I didn't travel 75, and 76 we're home, and 77 we played them there. And we went there. I tell you, the fans were already rambunctious. They were already on their feet and roaring. But when they pulled that iron horse, or that wooden horse out on the field, and then the players broke out. They had the blue jerseys on when we warmed up, and then they broke out with the green jerseys. Oh my God. that place lit up. The energy was just incredible. And it was one of the hardest hitting games that I ever played in. Notre Dame, that game was just intense. And we wound up losing, and Ross Browner and some of those guys that were there. It was truly Joe Montana. That was my first experience of seeing Joe Montana, and that game, that whole pageantry. I remember when we landed. This is where SC had their mark. The signature on when we played games. Mark Gould would take us for a walk. We'd go on a walk the day before the game. He'd take us walk around, and it might be on the field, it might be in some area on campus, and he'd talk about the old games and how we played this game, and we got beat by 50-some points, and we'll never get beat like that. I mean, all that you go through, right? And before you know it, you're standing there, all right, wait, you guys ready? Yeah. All right, go to bed. But that was by far. That game was by far to me, they put a signature on college football that day.
The best player that you played with at USC?
You asked me that, and I just, it is, that's something that's really a challenge, because of when I think of the backs, when I think of Ricky Bell, and seeing Ricky Bell go from linebacker to offense to running back, tailback, and to see him, and then to watch him just playing games and rush for over 200-something yards one game, I guess in Washington State, I think it was, and to see Ricky have that kind of year, and but Charles White, to play in the backfield with Charlie, and block for Charlie, and see the things that Charlie was capable of doing. I ran that video over when we played Alabama down there, and it looked like when Charlie went 70 yards or 60, 70 yards for a touchdown, and I made the block and got knocked out, and fell down and hit the DB. He fell down, I fell down, rolled over. I looked up, and there's Charlie cut off the block, and there's Charlie running down the field. He stepped, and Charlie looked like, I don't know if you've ever watched that film, as I'm laying there on the ground looking up, it looked like he ran hurdles over people. He stepped over people. What got me and hit my heart when I heard the commentator, what's his name? Whoa, Nelly.
Keith Jackson.
Keith Jackson.
Sure.
Keith Jackson could not believe what he saw. And if you ever listen to the film, the video, you'll hear him for the first time pause, hesitate, because he saw something that I saw, and I'm pretty sure in his mind and my mind, it was like, did Charlie just, he didn't just step over, hurdle over people, and just, it's an incredible run. And to watch him time after time show up, game after game show up. And, so I have a lot of respect for him. However, Vince Evans, if you take Vince Evans and put him in today's game as a running, throwing quarterback, wow. He took SC on, and they won the Rose Bowl and saved John Robinson. That John Robinson said, he saved my job. And to see Vince Evans, the talent, the ability to throw the ball, and then Paul Hackett did a great job working with him and working on the touch, and they worked on it over the field goal post of throwing the ball and touching, getting it over, and he worked on that, and to see him develop that. you take a guy like that, if you develop the offense where you had a running quarterback plus your tailbacks running the ball, then you have your receivers. Woo! Wow. And and I do it injustice that I don't talk about the offensive lineman. I just, I tell my wife, I talked to my wife about it, and I said, honey, the most enjoyable moments of my life has been in the locker room, seeing these guys on the football field, seeing the characteristics of the laughter and making jokes and about each other and having fun. And then you step out on that football field and now they're focused and knocking a little snot out of somebody, and just to see that. And you have Anthony Munoz and Brad Buddy and Pat Howe and Keith Van Horn and, guys like, and then Donnie Hickman and Marvin Powell and Gary Jeter and, you go on and to me, it's, what is that, the movie where you have all these characters? It's just the talent, which is tremendous. And to point one guy out is hard to do for me.
Sure.
I enjoy the talent that I was around, and it was incredible. They taught a lot to me. Marvin Cobb did the same. Gary Cobb, a linebacker. All these guys, Chip Banks. When they brought in Chip Banks and Austin Curry, Austin. And then, Charles White, when he came in with Moore and Williams, and the things Williams were doing, he stretched that field in a hurry. It's like, so but I never played with some great backs, in the past. But Moses Tutupu taught me some things, and Mosi was tremendous. He was a great blocking back, and Mosi is the reason why I became a fullback. He's the one that set me down. I was there to be a tailback, and they needed a fullback. They didn't recruit a back at that point, and they needed somebody to make the move to fullback. And I was very slow to make that transition. And then Mosi set me down in Heritage Hall and said, John Jackson wants to talk to you, and he's going to talk to you about moving to fullback. And are you willing to do that? No. I came in, they brought me in as a tailback, and yeah, but we need a fullback. He says, you can do it, and I have confidence in you. He says, plus, go talk to John. He's talkable. You can go and you can reach him, and you'll have a good conversation. And he bust the bubble. He calmed me down, and so I did. I went in there and sat down and talked to John, and John said, we want to move you to fullback, and I know you came here as a tailback, but we need a fullback, and we want you to play there. And so I made that move, went on, grudgingly made it. I should say that, because it was a transition. An old self had to die, and a new self. And it happened against Alabama. That block that I just mentioned to you, I had a rough time transitioning through it, but John Jackson was an encourager. That game, when I hit the DB, when I blocked him, fell down, he fell down, Charlie cut off my block, and I'm looking down the field, and as he's running down the field, in my mind, I'm thinking that could be me. And to me, that day, self died, and the team player rose and took over. And so I accepted the transition and then started playing. But that was a heck of a transition. But get back to the point, I play with a lot of great players. It's hard to say one great player.
How about against the best player that you played against during your time at USC?
Oh man, to me, how could you not, Joe Montana? How could you? Ooh, uh, even though Elway was great, but that 78 year, we played against him 77. No, that was Alabama. 78 to have them jump out on us like that, and then or to come back on us like that. And the word on Joe was always he's a comeback kid. He can come back, and so the score must have been 24-7 or something like that. And then they come roaring back and they go ahead by 2, with 26-24, and then we get the ball with 2 minutes left, and we got to drive it down and kick a field goal. We do that. Frank Jordan wins the game for us, and then that moves us on in a lot of ways to be co-national champs and get us in position. But Joe Montana, wow. Ross Bronner was something. There were some great players at UCLA, but when it came to watching somebody and say, how can we stop him? And the way we stopped them and beat them is that we had the ball the last drive. He didn't have it. We had it.
You gave us a hint on a couple of these already, but can you give us kind of a behind the scenes story during your time at USC? Maybe something that didn't get a lot of kind of media or fan coverage while you were there.
Man, you off the field, on the field, things like that, or is
sure?
It,
yeah, I mean, like I said, a little bit with the Marv Goo walks, before the game. Was there anything kind of that really stands out to you that you kind of remember again that didn't really get talked about a whole lot?
What I remember is in Coach Robinson. He reminds me of it. There's a couple of things he reminds me of those things. When we played Alabama, we played there in the Coliseum, and they moved. I was at fullback, and we were losing, and they had us 19-0 or 19 something like that, or 20, yeah, because we went up with 19, but we had to come back, and we did. We scored, and then we turned around and scored again, and then we got ourselves in position where we were down by 1 and had to make the 2-pointer, and that 2-pointer would give us the win in the Coliseum, and I was scheduled to block the end man on the line of scrimmage. Well, I'm responsible to block the end man on the line of scrimmage. I run out there and I go to block him, and he moves outside, and then he gets to Rob Hurdle and tackles Rob Hurdle. And I tell you what, for the last X amount of years, I've been beating myself up over that. I missed my block. And one day I saw Rob Hurdle, and I brought it up to Rob, and Rob said, Lynn, no. Hey, it's not like that. He said, I rolled out too far. And he came out and he made the tackle. That wasn't you. That was on me. And, it made me just go, oh, wow. Because what SC did for me is SC really getting a scholarship to go to USC was tremendous for me, and not just me, but for my family. We moved from Picayune, Mississippi, and moved into a place we stayed 50 years. My brother was, I had older brothers. I had 3 older brothers, and they were something. And one older brother high jumped over 7 feet. He held the record in the city for 6'8", something like that. Ran the high hurdles. Long jump, he did all that in track, played football, played baseball, was drafted by the Oakland A's and played 7 years with the Oakland A's. Okay. Teaching me baseball, how to hit, how to throw the ball. I was a pitcher, started pitching, I was one of those, I had a strong arm. So and so he would come home with his duffel bag, and he had his bats and his jerseys and all of that. And I would see him hanging in there in the Oakland A's, and I'd be standing there and, wow, look at that jersey. I'd try it on and stuff like that. And one day he got me, pulled me aside and said, okay, come on, come with me. I'm going to take you up to the park. We're going to throw some balls, and I'm going to teach you some things. So he took me up there. Now think about this. He played with Vita Blue. He played with those pitchers that switched from center field to pitching. My brother was that way. He can throw the ball from center field on a rope all the way to home plate. You know, he had a strong, so they tried to move him to pitching. He didn't want to do that. So we go to the park, and we're going and we're throwing the ball, and he says, I want to encourage you to do something. He says, I want to get you away from throwing a curveball. You're 11 years old and you're throwing a curveball. You don't need to throw a curveball. He says, your groin plate is right there in that elbow area. And when you're throwing a curveball, you're putting a lot of pressure in there, and we don't want you to hurt your arm. So what I want you to do is throw a knuckleball. So he taught me how to throw a 2-finger knuckleball, grip these other fingers around the ball, get the knuckleball, and to throw the knuckleball. So one game we're playing, I started practice on that. So came game time, I went out there, and I had been practicing with my catcher. And he throws a 4-finger out there, and that's the knuckleball. So I throw a knuckleball, and boom, I throw that thing starts dancing like this, and the batter, whoo, swing, and he catches the ball. And he runs out and he says, what the heck was that? I said, I don't know, but we're going to keep throwing it. But I had some great brothers. I had another brother academically that was, he was ROTC, and he'd sit down, and I hear him at night downstairs on the typewriter typing away. You know, and so they were teaching me a lot about what a student athlete looked like. They were teaching me. So when I got to SC, I was grateful to get there. I was one of the first ones to go to college. My mother and father graduated with probably in Mississippi and Alabama, maybe elementary level education. Okay. But they were, you know, pushing us and challenging us all the time. So when I went to SC, one of the things that was, I know I'm going all the way around. I'm coming back to that point.
I'm with you. I'm on the ride.
So when I went to SC, boy, I was like a fish out of water. It was, my head was spinning, not only with football, you know, competing against these great talented players that were out there, but then academically, it was a tremendous challenge. And one of the things I decided, I thought I would go business, but the time it would take to put into the learning of math and algebra and et cetera, and competing in the classrooms and stuff like that. And, you know, back then in those days, time was, most of the major time went to football. So I decided to study speech communication. And so speech helped me. I was introvert, shy, didn't say, if you talk to some of my friends, they'll tell you, man, in elementary school, junior high school, he said nothing. He wouldn't talk. He'd say a few things, but, you know, but SC helped me get to develop out of that shell. Which brings me to the Alabama game. I stood up and spoke when we played Alabama down there in Birmingham. No one expected me to stand up. And what I remember was in 1977, Alabama raising those 4 fingers up in the air, fourth quarter deal. And I remember standing up and saying, fellas, we're playing good football. Let's keep playing. But remember this, when we get into that fourth quarter, we're going to beat those 4 fingers down. Robinson missed that talk. And to this day, he still, you know, they tell me you spoke in the locker room, but I don't remember you talking. That was a memorable moment for me, for what USC helped me come out of my shell. USC helped me be one of the first ones in my family to graduate. My brother graduated with his BA. He started to take his master's at USC, so he was there. But then I came along, and then I got my BA there at SC. And it was something to see my family proud of me accomplishing that. And so I think that might bring us to one of the other questions that you have, that I would say to the young men and women that are there at the USC. You know, I remember I learned this. I used to stand up and give impromptu talks. And you know, impromptu talks is you didn't prepare for it. You just jump up there and just start talking. And I would sweat and stammer and stutter, but I learned a lesson. And this is another area where SC really grinded with me, as far as not just academically, but then also athletically, is prior planning prevents a pitiful poor performance. I don't know if you've ever heard the 6 Ps before, but that prior planning prevents a pitiful poor performance. And so I began preparing ahead of time, sitting down and writing my speeches and getting into it. And I remember, man, I put quality time into preparing for it and studying and reading about things and about the event that I'm going to be speaking about. And I gave a talk, and they asked me to be a speaker at a Beef Bowl. And so I prepared for that and shared my story of my mother and father. We were part of the second largest Negro migration coming from Mississippi at the time. So I shared that. I did research on that and looked into it, and it helped me really understand some things of who am I, what am I, and all that. And I gave a talk, and when I finished, I sat down, and my wife was there, and she was just looking at me, and she was smiling. And she says, man, did you see that? Did you hear the ovation? I said, yeah, that was a nice ovation. She said, nice ovation? They gave you 4 standing ovations. In addition to that, I didn't know that, I knew we were videotaping, but I didn't know that they were going to put it in a movie. And there's a movie that they have, I'm trying to think of the title of it. And my wife and I, we went and saw it. And I just slipped my mind on the title of it. But we wound up going to it, and it was shocking, surprising. We're sitting there, and I'm thinking, man, I've come a long ways. The day that I went to USC, I wouldn't open my mouth. Now here I am sitting in a theater watching The Amateur, watching this movie. And then here comes my voice, and I'm looking at my wife, and she has her mouth open. She's like, so.
And that was again, like you mentioned, one of the questions, the piece of advice that you would give to current or future USC students.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, yeah, it's important, fun to play ball, or, you know, whatever sport you're playing, that's great. But I sit there, and as I look at that degree on the wall upstairs in my office area, I have that degree hanging over. That has gotten me hired. Got a call in September. They're looking for a head football coach over at Los Angeles Southwest Junior College. I go there and meet with the president and the VP, and they interviewed me, and the interview went so well that after they said, okay, what's your plan? And I share with them what plan I had, how I would run their program and turn their program around, which is on probation. And so the interview was just, it was a home run. And when I finished laying out my plan, she sat back, the president sat back and said, "You're hired." Now watch this. What shocked me was the VP says, "What is your 10-year plan?" Ooh. 10-year plan. And so when I think of once gaining the confidence of being able to stand up and speak in front of people, the power that it permeates, and then to be able to deliver what you will do, how you would turn this program around, and to see at the end of the game, at the end of the season, that final game, to see that happen, to see it manifest, what you spoke into existence. I'm glad I went to USC. I'm glad what I went through and the challenges that I had at USC helped me to overcome and gain a degree that's helped me get employed there. And you know, I'm in a movie.
So we'll shift a little back on the field, and again, this might have been an answer that you've talked about before too. But during your USC career, what was the best either road or neutral site experience, the best venue or game that you played in away from the Coliseum?
Away from the Coliseum. Yeah, the Notre Dame was a best venue. I would say that Alabama would fit right up in there when it came to it was the battle of the undefeateds. It was two teams coming together and highly ranked teams. You know, I think they were number one. We're number two, number three, I think it was at that time. And to come together in that game, it had a lot more meaning to it. Excuse me, it had a lot more meaning to it, even though 77 had a lot more meaning for Notre Dame because they won the national championship that year. In the case of Alabama, that was more of two teams coming to battle for the national championship. And so that Alabama experience was sweet. And also we lost in the Coliseum and I had a bitter taste in my mouth. I wanted the revenge.
Sure.
But the venue, you know, going to Notre Dame, I remember my first time I went, I had to, you know, Cain, close your mouth. You know, wow, you know, you're looking, you see the pictures and you see the trophies and you see the tunnel, you walk out and you think about Rudy. Now, Rudy played when I played. He was playing at that time. And so we didn't know about Rudy, that story, but I got his video, his movie, and I watched, and my wife was like, how many times are you going to play that? Well, every time I see it, I see Ricky go by and I'm looking for me too. So it's Notre Dame in Alabama because of but they're two different things. Now, UCLA is up there only, you know, because it's the rivalry. It's just that pageantry, that whole thing, and then playing Pop Warner against some of those guys, players, and then now here you are in the Rose Bowl. I mean, in the Coliseum playing against one another. That had a lot to a ring to it from that standpoint, um, that pageantry. So that was good. It was a little awkward playing in the Coliseum when it's your home game, and then you turn around now it's their home game, and you gotta make a little but it still seemed like a home game.
Sure, sure it did.
Yeah. So, but I would say that those two were great.
Okay. And then I mean, you've played with some of the best USC players of all time, but who would be a guy that you didn't play with, a former USC player that you wished you could have played with?
That's a good question. You don't realize how sweet that question is. As I almost went to Washington, and Warren Moon was a quarterback. Who was a junior college player. He was at West LA and I was at East LA. Mm-hmm. And I was being recruited by Don James, heavily recruited by them. And it was, I still have pictures of that experience with going up there. And I really enjoyed my visit with Washington, except for the flight. That was the signature. I'm not coming. Forget that. But they did a great job in selling me Washington, and I like what I saw. I like the enthusiasm, and remember they had a good football team. It would have been fun, and playing for Don James. He was a heck of a coach, and I was used to coaches like Don James. I grew up with, my Pop Warner coach was well known and was very successful in the Pop Warner area. The high school coaches were successful. Coach Mike Garrett was there, and they ran the I formation. They ran the same thing as USC, and they got into I formation. So, I knew I had a good understanding what a good coach looked like. And Don James was, he was somebody that I could have played for, but, it just wasn't right, the flying part of it. So.
You've talked about a ton of memories from USC, but what's the one when you look back, when you think back on your time, is there one memory that kind of is that first thing that you think about your time at USC?
It's just an overall experience that I'm very blessed to have experienced. I just being recruited by John McKay and that whole experience with him, and the players that I played with back then, that 75 year, the 76, it was all one package. Sure. To me.
Sure.
It's just one package of the fun times, and those are the things that I miss. I miss the moments of having fun and players joking and kidding with one another. And I remember we were preparing a place, it was a home game, and we were used to having us sit, and we'd go to the back of the bus, and the running backs would go back there, and so we're talking Charles White, Dwight Ford, and those guys, and we're sitting in. We would go to a movie on Friday. Friday we go to a movie. So we went to a movie. This was a home game, and the running backs come back and say, "We're going to get in the front of the bus, and we're going to send them linemen to the back. All right, so we're going to sit in the back of the theater, so that when the movie's over, we're going to run out and we're going to get on the bus, and we're going." So, boom, movie's over. We ran out. We jumped in. We sit in front of the bus, and they come walking up. Get in the back of the bus. All right, you get back there. So we sent the guy to the back, and they stood up. Now imagine these 260, 70-pound guys, and they started rocking, rocking the bus, and the driver starting to drive. And it was total fun. You know, I wind up meeting players that have lasted even today. I call people and call players. And Pat Howe and I became roommates with the Atlanta Falcons. I go to the Falcons, and Pat, he's the second round draft pick, and I wound up going in the fourth, and we go there to Atlanta together, and we become roommates, and we know one another, and you know, one thing after another, and so we have this experience from USC that extended on outside. I still call him, I still visit him and see his wife and see Michelle, and call them every once in a while and talk to them and let them know when I'm coming through Fresno. So it became more of a relationship, and you know, I talk to people all the time. I call Ronnie Lott and Marcus at times, and so it's more to me, and there's not just one moment.
So there is no really after football for you. I mean, you from USC to the NFL and then hung around in coaching too. What's been kind of your transition, and what was alluring to you, I guess, about staying in the sport for as long as you have?
You know, I was pulled into, there's something that coaches saw in me. I was in high school, and I was 14 going in the 10th grade, 16 graduating in the 12th grade. So the coach was like, "Hey, Lynn, why don't you sit out a year and then you'll grow?" Because when I went to SC, I was 5'7". I mean, went to Roosevelt, I was 5'7", 160 pounds. And when I graduated, I was 5'10 and a half, 180 pounds. Then a year later, I was 6'1", 207 pounds. And our coach, Chavez, he tried to sell me to Arizona State. He called Cush and said, Frank Cush, because they had sent a wide receiver, Greg Hudson, who his brother, Tyrone Hudson, played at USC defensive back. So Greg Hudson goes to Arizona State. So they call Arizona State and could, Frank, take this guy. I'm telling you, he's going to grow. Don't look at his size. I'm telling you, he's going to grow. Okay. His brother's 6'3", 210 pounds, graduated from Roosevelt, high jumped over 7 feet, played baseball, basketball, football, track. He did it all. Take this guy. Nah. So I go to East LA College, even at USC. You know, I went to USC during spring ball. Now we're talking in the spring of '74. I go to spring ball, and I knock on that big gate. It was Green Gate at the time, and I knocked on the gate. Said, I want to come in and watch practice. Guy said, no, you can't come in. I said, yeah, well, I come all the way over here to watch practice. No, you can't come in. Well, how come those people get to come in? Well, they're invited people. Close the gate. So I walk away. I'm like, oh, man. Well, I'm on the verge of breaking O.J. Simpson's rushing record. And sure enough, the closer we get to that record, I look up, and there's a guy just standing there smiling at me. And I'm like, who's this guy? And he wound up being a USC recruiter. And he comes over, he says, hey, Lynn Cain, I'm so-and-so, shakes hands with me. USC is interested in you. And I'm thinking, I mean, doggone 7 months ago, y'all closed the gate in my face. Now you come recruiting me? But that didn't stop me. I decided to go there. But that was, you know, hey, the way it was. And Arizona State was the same way. They didn't want me at that time. And next thing I know, here comes Arizona State. Frank Cush is calling my house. He's coming by to visit. And, you know, I just couldn't take their trip. But USC, I just couldn't turn them down. So the next thing I know, I get invited to spring practice, And the guy who closes the gate in my face is the same guy that opens up the gate and says, "Come on in, Lynn Cain. John McKay's right here."
Great.
Success, success. But I enjoyed my career at USC. I enjoyed what I did in other places. I really enjoyed what I accomplished. And I was more concerned about winning, playing the game to win. And I'm fortunate that I was able to, we came 2 games away from going to the Super Bowl. 1980 team was something. It was a lot of fun. There's a price to be paid for success. What I like about USC, what I like about where I played, even at East LA College, we were state champs. And so I learned how to practice hard and maximize your potential, become the best that you can, not just athletically, but academically, do your best. And so that was important. In 1980, we went and excuse me. We wound up 3-3, and we're getting ready to have a dismal year. And the guys got together and said, "Hey, let's have a team meeting." So we called a team meeting and excluded the management, the coaching staff and management with. And I remember in that meeting, players shared their hearts. Some guys were starters, but were benched because they're not practice players and et cetera. And so you got a lot of decisions that are made. And so these guys said, "I tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna play special teams, even though I know I'm a starter. I'm better than the guys that are playing. I'm gonna give my all in special teams." So each player would, I know that I shouldn't be starting. I know that they started me, but I'll give my best in at safety or cornerback. All right. So people made a commitment to the team. We had a 7-game run streak. We went up to St. Louis and played them up there, and they had us 24-6 at halftime. We came roaring back, tied that game up, went into overtime, won it in overtime, and then we had a run of 7-8 wins. We wound up going 12-4. We were the number 1 team in the NFC West, NFC Conference, and played Dallas. And had Dallas, we were 14 points ahead with 5 minutes left in the game. 5 minutes. And they came back and beat us. Whoo! I will always remember that moment. Especially when we went into the locker room and we saw them taking down the champagne and putting it back in the cases. But there's a price to be paid for success. And that's what I liked about what happened, what I saw at USC, what I saw at East LA College, what I saw in Pop Warner. I saw people commit and pay a price. There's a price to be paid for success. And there's a poem that was written by Paul Bear Bryant. What is the price of success? It is simply to use all your courage to force yourself to concentrate on the problem at hand, to think of it deeply and constantly, to study it from every angle and to plan, to have a high and sustained determination to put over what you plan to accomplish, not if circumstances be favorable to its accomplishment, but in spite of adverse circumstances. And nothing worthwhile has ever been accomplished without some adverse circumstance overcome. to refuse to believe that there are any circumstances sufficiently strong enough to defeat you in your purpose. Hard, I should say so. That's why so many men answer the siren call of the rut and remain on the beaten path of beaten men. Nothing worthwhile has ever been accomplished without some pain, constant endeavor, and the constant application of ambition. That is the price of success. There's a constant application, constant. When you join in with a team, a coach, a leader that understands what that means, and they constantly putting that out there, and you're working towards it. I'm telling you what, you can be standing there with a rose in your mouth. And that's what happened to me. Who would think that a kid from Boyle Heights would play in the Rose Bowl? I know I did. I thought about it, believed about it, and it happened. And then the B, Coach Robinson says it all the time, Cain, 32 counter. That was the play that sealed the deal. They knew if we go into toss formation, a toss action, they're running to get to Charlie. And we came back with a 32 counter that gave us the first down, and we wound up winning, ran the clock out, and we won the Rose Bowl, and we wound up co-national champs. Wow. But that's what I see. That I played with players that understood the constant application, the constant sharpness that we had to be prepared. Practice used to be rambunctious. It used to be loud at every place, whether it was East LA College, with the Falcons, with the Trojans. It was constant. We used to go out and challenge each other, and it was competitive. I mean, competitive. If you know, in thinking about who were some of the great players that I went against, whether it be practice or game, you try going against Ronnie Lott in practice over, Dennis Thurman, Dennis Smith, Dennis Johnson, you know, just wow. It was intense in practice. But it was the same way with the Falcons when we played there. It was intense in practice. And sometimes you go into games and it's like, whew, that was easy. That was not bad. But then there's other games when you come down to it, when you play Notre Dame, you're playing Alabama, when you're playing those big games like that, it's war. And may the best man hang in there, hang in there, hang in there, and win. When I think of hanging in there, I think of that cat, a kitten up on the wall, ceiling, with his nails in and he just hanging in there. Well, that's what we did with the Falcons. We hung in there with St. Louis. We hung in there with other teams. And we just hung and kept playing. Don't look at the scoreboard and just keep playing. Bob, you're going to have me playing a game tomorrow.
I wanted to open it up, that 1978 season. I wanted to get into that a little bit. When you're coming into that year, is it clicking for you guys that, hey, you know what you have and you could end up kind of doing what that team did?
No, there was a sense of uncertainty. You know, you think about it, they're moving me to fullback and 205 pounds. And I'm going to be blocking. I'm 6'1" and a half, almost 6'2". And I will be blocking players that are 6'5", 250, 260. Now, we run blast, and blast it's straight ahead. It's, two rams, and you want me to block the linebacker. 240, 250. Now imagine somebody asked me, what was your job description? I said, my job description was slamming my body into somebody and winning 98% of the time. That's my job. So we go into that year. They have high hopes. They know what we can do. They've seen it in practice, but can it translate into game? Whatever you do, when it's developing either weight room or running or conditioning or plays in practice, can it convert over to actual on the field? And so, remember, I was going to be the running back. They were going to let me run the ball, kind of like they wanted to run it like Dave Farmer and Mosi Tupu. Dave ran the ball and Mosi blocked. And we started off that way. Now, we played Texas Tech in the stadium, in the Coliseum. Now, I wasn't the media's favorite guy because I got injured. I had a laceration. I went in, I blocked the guy, and he hit me, and my helmet went up, and my chin strap went up in the air, and a laceration came across my chin. Now, this is the part where this is what fans don't know. This is one of those fans don't know stories. And players, so a lot of them they saw it. They had to be taken by it. So I go back into the huddle, and the players are like, the linemen are like, "Oh, Cain, you got blood all over your chin, and go ahead." Now this is pre where you get a cut and blood, they send you out of the game. In other words, you can stay in the game, but this one they're like, get out. So I go out and come to the sideline, and they're like, oh, the doctor's like, whoa, So everybody's yelling this whoa stuff, and I'm like, what? You got a laceration, you got a cut underneath his chin. All right. So they sit me on a bench, and they bring out 4 or 5 of these big, tall guys, 6'5" guys, and stand them around. Okay, get around so that they can't see what we're doing. So they get in there, and then the doctor comes in, and he wipes off all the blood, and he sees this cut, and he says, Cain, we're going to have to stitch you up right here on the sideline. We cannot take you into the locker room, do all that, and clean you up. We got to stitch you up right here on the sideline. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to staple your chin back together, okay? Doc, wait a minute. Did you say staple? He said, yeah. So he reaches over there and he pulls up this surgical stapler gun. He says, we're going to staple your chin. Wow. Now you got my teammates are all standing around looking down going, gee. I'm glad it's you, Cain. So I said they cleaned it off and got it all ready, and then staple my chin right there on the sideline. Gauze it up where they cleaned it up and gauze it so that way I can go back in the game. Turn around, pick my helmet up, and gave me my helmet. Put that helmet back on my head. John Robinson said, Cain, you ready? Get back in the game. So I went back in the game. Well, I'll be honest with you. I did not want to stick my head into the blocker. I was protecting my chin, right? So the media wrote about that, and it was like, it wasn't, it was like, oh, Cain, poor blocker, didn't play well, and they need to play so-and-so, Ricky Johnson, but he need to play him more. So they brought Ricky in, started bringing Ricky in more, right? Lord and behold, Ricky breaks his ankle. Now they turn around and go, Cain, you got to play the whole game now. So that Texas game, Texas Tech is over. Now we go into the next game, and now I'm playing more. And by the time we get to the Alabama game, we're driving down the field. here's one of those other stories that you say that fans might want to hear about. We're driving the ball down the field. Now we're having these drives like 8, 10, 15 plays. And you're exhausting because you're constantly running. And then it's humid there. The humidity, just walking outside, we didn't even stretch because we had warmed up. We just walked outside and you're already sweating from the humidity. So I'm driving up and down the field, and I don't know if you've ever been in that moment in time where you're just so dog tired that when you begin to fall down, you're just looking for a comfortable place to hit the ground so you can lay there for a minute. I mean, tired. So I remember this is what Paul McDonald always brings this story up, because I turn around and I'm tired and I raise my hand up, and you got to give that signal. You get a finger like this, and then John Robinson is doing this. He's waving, stay in, and I'm going, me, come up. He's saying, no, stay in, and I'm just walking, and Paul's calling the play, and he turns around, Lynn Cain, where you going? Where you going? I'm tired. I'm tired. We didn't have 4 or 5 series of 8 to 10, 15 plays. I'm tired. So I walked to the sideline, and John Robinson calls the timeout. He says, get over here. Help him, give him water, get him ready to go, get him back in the game. He is not coming out of the game. Now I go from substituting in and out of the game. Now I can't come back. You don't want me to come out of the game. If I got to call all 3 timeouts, he is going back in the game. So I became valuable over the period of time and playing. And sure enough, throughout the season, I did my job. I played and did what I needed to do. I accepted the role of being a team player. Robinson said it in the California, I think it was a Cal game in the Coliseum. Charlie, it had rained and it was slippery, and Charlie kept trying to cut. He's falling, and so John, substitute, brings me over to the sideline. He says, Lynn, you've always wanted to be that go-to guy. He says, today's your day. Charlie's slipping and falling. We got to give you the ball. So they gave me the ball, and I think I had 100 and something yards, a touchdown or 2, and we wound up beating Cal Berkeley in the Coliseum. But that changed the following week. They went back to not giving me the ball at all. But
you did run for almost 1,000 yards that year, and 977 yards is the most ever in a season by a USC fullback. I'm curious, you were part of a lot of different really great backfields. I mean, you mentioned Mosi Tutupu. Marcus Allen was just getting there as you were taking off, and like you mentioned, Charles White's there, Ricky Bell's there. Was there a year, if you had to pick kind of the best backfield group while you were there at USC, was there one group that really worked together the best? I mean, again, obviously all of them successful during your time there.
My ego is going to say, definitely going to say me and Charlie. That's my ego. But I know that having Mosi Tutupu in the backfield with that 78 team would have been very interesting. I think the blocking would have improved. The running would have been, hey, I just think they would have won, even, with Mosi in that backfield when it comes to that. Because Mosi was a heck of a blocker. He was very talented. And then he was a sneaky runner. He can run the ball here and there from that standpoint. But I just know that what I brought to USC, I can block, I can run, I can catch. I can even throw the ball. And it doesn't take much to be a decoy. So the things that we were able to do, they exploited those areas. John Robinson and John Jackson began to exploit the talent in the backfield. That's where I think that there's that equal with Mosi, is exploiting the talent, whether it be his talent or my talent. They did that. They found a way to exploit what I do well. I remember John Jackson always talking about use the quickness. You got to get your quickness there. You got to get there. You can't be trying to muscle that big guy. And he's right. I couldn't. Those 240-pound guys, 250 guys, 260 guys, and even some of the linemen, 300. I'm not muscling people, but I realized in Pop Warner, that's what I learned is they drew a line. They said, this is the equal line. It's where you're 5 yards and he's 5 yards. Now, what you want to do with your little body is get on the other side of that line. So if you're at 6 yards, you're going to win the battle 99% of the time. So that's how I played. I got on the other side before they picked up steam, and I was knocking the snot out of them before they knocked the snot out of me. That's how I play. And so I made it work for what we were doing at SC. They opened up the run game. They were able to, remember, with Mosi, they would fake it was a 34 belly, what they call. So they're faking a toss and giving the belly, as where I was a 32 dive or a 30 trap, straight ahead plays. They were saying, hey, look, we know you can hit the gaps up in here and get through there quickly and make yardage. And so that's what I started doing. I started, but I was coming from East LA, which ran a veer offense, which was the dive plays up in the inside. So they basically recruited a player who was coming that can run those plays that they were running. Now, when they ran a counter off of that, we had counter in that offense over at East LA College. So they basically, I don't know if they talked to my former coach before or had words with him about, where were some of the plays that Lynn can run, but they sure enough started running those plays and it worked. Plus, with my quickness and speed coming through those gaps, the A gaps, and then further out in the B gap, I can get there in a hurry. And then with Charlie back there, they had to figure out who was going to carry the ball. When we ran straight ahead, you got if I'm a defender, I'm looking at a dive play, or is this a 22 blast, which is all the same action coming at them. And then before they know it, somebody else is blocking them, and then I'm squirting through a hole and finding the lane up in there. So SC got a lot out of moving me to that position. And it wound up, like you said, culminating into almost 1,000 yards. They had 2 runners, and that I've always looked for that. I've always, since I played Pop Warner, I've always looked for somebody who could be a teammate, a backmate. William Andrews, the same way. The kid at East LA College, we both were freshmen coming in, and we just, Alvin Fike, he rushed for almost 1,000 back there too. It just, then when I left, they gave it to him. He wound up being the go-to back. East LA made a decision, which is the same thing with USC, that we can win by giving, at East LA, they gave me the ball. They made a decision. We have to give you the ball 30 times a game. Oh, so when they did that and they have 199 yards the first game, they kept giving it to me. And then they have 1,666 yards and the state championship. I wanted to win. I know I'm not that rushing title is hey, but the sweeter the berry when you can win a state championship or a national championship.
Sure.
And then 2 games away from the Super Bowl. I wanted that so bad.
Talking about national championship, that 1978 team at USC, in your mind, and I'm going to go ahead and assume I know the answer coming from this, but where does that team rank in kind of USC football history? What do you feel you guys did, and if you have conversations with guys from other national championship teams, or when you look at some of those teams, where does that 78 team kind of rank in your mind in USC football history?
That's definitely a great question, because I see that there was just so much that we offered from that standpoint. I still, and looking at that 72 team, whoo, I watched them, and every weekend I'd sit down and want to watch what they were doing, and to see their Batman, Richard Woods, but then our Dennis Johnson. There's some similarities. We had some players that can play and compete, even though Anthony Davis and McNair and Cunningham. There's that theme in there though, civil rights. They have the theme of civil rights. When they traveled to play Alabama, that talent went down there, and I see that being a lot of what they help integrate sports. They helped me to come in to SC with a different package when it came to the African American athlete. I'm blessed because of those guys. They paid a price, and they played a game that opened up the doors for people to go to Alabama. Not that I would have gone to Alabama, but I know some friends and people that I met that I coached with in Atlanta. They were from Alabama. They played when I played, and so they were there just before Bear Bryant and so I got a chance to coach with those guys and talk to those guys, and there's really no difference in the Mondra, the talk when it comes to coaching or motivation or maximizing your potential. They understood the same language. That's where I said that, what is the price of success? They understood that a price had to be paid. I think we're ranked high up in that group because of that team in 72. You knew what you had before they lined up. You already knew from 71 and 70 what you had there. And then including the freshmen that came in. I think that's like Anthony Davis and people like that, But they didn't know with us. But they found out that they had some players that can play. And the talent, we recruited the talent, whether it be Anthony Munoz, to watch him play, Pat Howe, Keith Van Horn when he came in, to lose to Arizona State, to lose 2 centers during the week, to lose 2 centers during the game, to take a nose guard and move him to center, to lose to Arizona State, but to turn around and win the next X amount of games with a center move from nose guard, learning the plays on the run. That's worth something. When it comes to players stepping up and maximizing their potential, because that's what John Robinson was about. That's what John McKay was about. It was about getting players to be able to reach their potential every week. Do that, and we did that. We matched that with the 72 team. We stepped up and we played. If we don't lose those centers, I really believe we walk away victorious against Arizona State. We go undefeated that year. And I think without a shadow of a doubt, we're now national champs, not co-national champs. And now it's a whole different story, whole different debate where this team falls into that. We had some talented tailbacks that were sitting on the bench. Dwight Ford, whoo, that brother. Some of them runs he made looked like they shot him out of cannon, man. Boom! And that kid was running. You know, we had talent. Some of the things that happened on defense, we lost Gary Cobb, but then Scoggins comes in and he steps up and plays. You know, we just had people continue to step in and keep playing, whether it be on defensive backs and the backs we had back there that was playing, along with Ronnie Lott. There was other players, Ward, who stepped up and had some great games, one-on-one coverage against people, knocking balls down, making interceptions. The talent that just seemed to, you know, crescendo. It's hard to say we're number 1 or number 2, number 3. I really believe that we're high up in that category. Somebody did I don't think it was you that did a mock championship from all the teams,
Mm-hmm.
and we wound up losing to the 34 team. Did you do that
No,
mock?
that wasn't us. No.
I found it hard to believe how we would lose to that 34 team. But it's hard to say for me. It just, that 72 team is just, it had some incredible talent, and Teamus Parker and those guys that it just, offensive and defensively, they were real sound.
Sure.
But we were too, you know. I don't think there was a game other than that Notre Dame. We knew we had to notch it up against Notre Dame. We knew we had to notch it up against Alabama. We knew, as Don Robinson laid it out there in the media guidebook. That media guidebook, he said that we got to win the first 4 or 5 games. He says then we got to run the table the next games. And that's going to be tough, because that's when you're playing some tough teams. And he was right. You know, we had to get out the blocks right away. We did. It was just that Arizona State game. And to hear, you know, the way our guys got injured, it just, especially, yeah, there's things that fans don't know that we experience. I remember, and this happens all the way down in Little League, but players trying to hurt you and twisting your ankles. And I remember a game we played, this was in junior college. I was having a heck of a game. I wound up having 199 yards. And so I'm laying in a pile. I get tackled. I'm laying in a pile. My arms are all, I can't move. All these bodies are on top of me. And I can't move my head. I'm laying there with the helmet. They're just wedged in. And here comes a finger. Someone has their finger, and they're coming towards my eye. I can come. I'm like, oh. And I had a center who knew all this. Pull you off the pile. And he pulling, but get off the pile, get off him, yeah. And then I see that hand come down, and they pull me up and get me up. That's what I appreciate about the linemen. They know when you get into dirty play, and some of that went on. But we persevered that and kept moving, kept going, and kept playing. Now that's a part of, I tell my son, I used to tell him, I used to tell my grandsons, even my wife, it's easy to play a game when you're healthy. But when you're banged up, when I had that laceration, that's what I was thinking about, that more than when you turn an ankle and you still have to play, and they're still expecting you to play. Crack rib. That's when the game, that's where I really take my hat off to a lot of the players that continue to play. Remember in that, what is the price of success? Not if circumstances be favorable. See, what do you do when you're injured? What do you do when you dislocate a finger? What happens when you got a crack rib? Do you keep playing, or do you? And you learn a lot about a person's willpower. And so that's what I appreciate about the teammates that year, is that they persevered through a lot of stuff and overcame a lot of things. Some players were injured. They had to work their way back in the plane. Some people had to step up and sub in for the people. I got injured, hurt my ankle in the Hawaii game. Someone else had to step in and take over and play. We wound up beating Hawaii. That kept us on track for the playing Michigan and playing in the Rose Bowl and winning the Rose Bowl and being co-national champs. So there's that side of the game that I really take my hats off to players who kept playing.
All right, Lynn Cain, we really appreciate the time. USC national champion, one of the all-time USC fullbacks in Trojan history. Thank you so much for being on with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. Go Trojans.